So, welcome to our GL Assessment Nonverbal Reasoning Parent Workshop. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon to talk about nonverbal reasoning and hopefully give you lots of tips and hints on how to support your child with this topic. Certainly, nonverbal reasoning is a subject area that's not often taught within schools. There are some independent schools that do a little bit of nonverbal reasoning, but generally it's a case, certainly within state schools, that nonverbal reasoning doesn't really form any part of their curriculum. So often when we start introducing NVR, we may well be the first people to do that. And that's always an exciting moment because children often look at it and think, oh, what's this all about? And we do very much treat it like puzzles, like games. And I think that's how children need to view them because a lot of the question types are very puzzly and certainly do involve having to work out things like sequences and patterns. And I think it's an interesting test of academic ability. There are question marks about it as a topic, what does it actually test? But certainly it is quite mathematical. It can involve things like rotation. It can involve a knowledge of shape. And I think certainly there have been major links between maths and nonverbal. And I think a child who is generally good at maths can often be good at NVR. However, with some NVR question types, and when I think of a lot of the spatial reasoning, then it involves children understanding what happens to shapes when they are manipulated or rotated. And sometimes children do find that quite difficult. What we also believe, though, the more you practice, the better you will get. The more you are exposed to NVR, certainly your skills will get better. And that's certainly applicable, of course, to our students. The more we practice, the better we will get. So just going to, first of all, just talk very briefly, as I've already done, about what is nonverbal reasoning. So nonverbal is about shapes and patterns. It was actually designed initially, I think, in Holland. That's as far back as I can see it went. And it was designed for a set of Japanese individuals who were coming over to Holland, and the Dutch wanted to know how academically bright they were without them being able to speak Dutch. So they presented them with some non-verbal reading questions, and that gave them a sort of a score and a bit of an understanding of their knowledge base. But it certainly does go back quite a long way. It is also out in the real world in the sense of it's not just restrained to something like the 11 plus. My wife many years ago went for a job with Heinz Baked Beans as their marketing manager, and she was presented with a non-verbal test to do. So it isn't just something that's linked to something like CATS test or the 11 plus or even ISEB common pre-test. Then it is actually a case that it is in other spheres as well. So the other thing on this slide is we've just mentioned how we can categorize nonverbal. So there's three key elements to nonverbal reasoning. Now remember, I'm talking initially about nonverbal, not spatial reasoning. We will come to spatial this afternoon, but initially I am just talking about nonverbal reasoning. And the three categories are similarities and differences. So finding similarities between figures and shapes. And you might hear me talk a lot this afternoon about figures. When I talk about a figure, I'm talking about that whole shape. Okay, so sometimes we can sort of flip between differences, something called odd one out, which I know often children do find a little bit more difficult than some of the other question types. Pairs, or analogies as they're often known, series and grid questions, and also codes. And I must admit, I think codes would certainly be one of my favourites. Kira, do you have a favourite question type in nonverbal? Kira, you need to unmute yourself if you are able to talk. It's getting used to that Zoom thing again, isn't it? That's all right. I don't know if you can unmute yourself. We'll need to work. Ah, there we go. Yeah. Do you have a favourite question type in nonverbal?
Do you have a favourite? I like fold and punch.
Ah, the fold and punch ones. Okay, so those are under sort of spatial reasoning, aren't they? So hopefully we'll have a look at some of those later. I'm a big fan of those ones as well. But In terms of NVR, as you can see, parents, we've got sort of 3 categories that we're going to focus on. One of the things that we teach very, very early on in the process of doing non-verbal reasoning is a mnemonic. And I'm sure you're all familiar with mnemonics. They often help you understand things. So if we think of, I don't know, rainbow colours, for example, Richard of York gave battle in vain is a mnemonic that I remember learning. And that tells you, or those letters then stand for the different colours. Now, in non-verbal reasoning, we have one that we've sort of created ourselves, I suppose, over the years. And it does relate to any non-verbal reasoning question. So if a child gets stuck and they're not sure what to do, they can refer back to this mnemonic. And the mnemonic goes, we've got SPANSSROS. We say Spansros is our mnemonic that we need to learn. Now, probably wondering why there's a boy holding up some soggy socks and a rotten orange there. There is a reason for that. So I'm actually going to put Kirith under the test, actually. See how much he remembers. It was a little while ago that we did it, but Kirith, can you remember what each of these letters stands for?
So I think S, the first S is for size.
Oh, not quite. It comes later, size. Can you remember what the first S is? Think about...
Size, shape.
Good boy. That's the one. Shape.
Yeah.
So first one's shape. Well done. What about the P?
Position.
Position. Good. What's the A?
A is angle or
angle. Well done. Good. N?
N is for number.
Well done.
Other S is size.
Size. Well done. Doing well.
Other S is for shading.
Shading, good boy, very important, isn't it, in non-verbal shading? I mean, it's funny, isn't it, with non-verbal, that actually all the questions are very much in black and white, aren't they? They're not in colour, but there are so many different ways of shading a shape, whether that be, I don't know, cross-hatched or black or grey, or maybe you've got a dotted fill of some kind. So shading is a very, very important aspect of non-verbal. Well done. And then 3 more words, R, O, and an S.
R is for rotation.
Well done. Good.
O is for overlapping.
Very good. Excellent.
The
last S. So very much a mathematical word, the next one, Kirith. Think about a dashed line coming down the middle of a shape.
Symmetry.
I gave you far too much of a clue there, Kirith, didn't I? Well done. Symmetry. Good boy. So those words are very, very important because, as I said earlier, if a child isn't quite sure how to approach it, they could say, well, have I checked shape? Have I looked at position? Have I looked at angle? Have I looked at number? And they can sort of systematically go down through those variables. Sometimes the more complicated the question, the more variables I'm going to have to consider or look at. Now, we know that for every NVR question, in other words, every question type that is flat on the page, then actually that mnemonic can hold us in very good stead. The reason for the boy holding up the socks is because we make up a funny rhyme. So it goes, silly people always need soggy socks, and then rotten oranges smell, hence the sort of smelly looking orange that we've got there. So again, it just helps children remember it. And there were various other ones you could have. Silly penguins always need slippery surfaces, another one I remember learning. And then you can just make sure that you retain those key variables. As we go through the questions today, and we'll obviously be practicing some, we'll actually go back to that mnemonic, particularly to show you how much we use it. So if your child is in year 4, and some of the parents in this call today will have children in year 4, this is really important that they understand that. If your child only joined us in year 5, we very much start with this just to make sure that they know it. Children in year 4 very much recap it to make sure it is something they know. There are a few people in the chat who are just typing what the letters stand for, and that's absolutely great. Rotation, rather than reflection. Reflection is a question type that you may see, but rotation is the word that we want you to think about. So what we're going to do now, parents, we're actually going to just talk about these individually. So we're going to start off by talking about shape. Interestingly, just before we came onto the call, I asked Kirith about shape, and he said, yeah, sometimes I'll get muddled with, was it heptagons and hexagons, Kirith?
Yeah, so all the other shapes, because the name's quite different, I'm okay with them. And then my hexagons and heptagons, sometimes I get them the other way.
It can easily be done, can't it, to get them slightly muddled up. And I mean, one of the things with non-verbal is being able to articulate it and actually say, well, this shape is overlapping that shape. Now, we want you to have that right terminology. So rather than saying, I don't know, this quadrilateral, for example, well, what quadrilateral is it? Oh, it's a trapezium. Okay. How many sides has a trapezium got? Oh, it's got 4. Then having that ability to articulate your answer is sometimes just as important as getting the right answer. So we really encourage our children in the lessons, and we would also say this to you parents, that when you're working through nonverbal at home, do get your child to explain why they think the answer is the answer. So rather than just saying, oh, the answer's A, and then sort of moving on to the next question, get them to explain, get them to say, oh, well, I can see there that I've counted the number of sides, for example, or I can see that those shapes are shaded in the same way. And being able to explain it does make a massive difference. And you'll see today, I'm sure when Kirith goes through some questions with you, he will be able to explain very clearly, this is how I got the answer and why. So shape is important. Knowing the properties of shapes are very important as well. The second word is position, and knowing the position of the shapes. And I thought might be worth just having a little look at how position can come into a question type. So this question here actually involves you finding the one that belongs in the group. So in other words, what we've got here is we've got a series of shapes at the top, and then one of these shapes from A, B, C, D, or E belongs in this question mark. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to understand what links these 4 shapes together. So have a look at those 4 shapes, see if you can decide how they're linked, and then we're going to find one of these that goes with that group at the top. If you want to type your answers in the chat, you're more than welcome to. Again, even if we've got children in the workshop this afternoon, feel free, children, to have a go as well. You can put your parents under the test, see if they can work it out as well. So we're trying to find the one shape that belongs with those 4 at the top. And you might describe this as most similar, most alike, very typical sort of question type that you might see. So let's have a little look. We've got quite a few. Oh, look at that. Got lots of answers in the chat, which is lovely. Well done, parents and children. But lots of different answers as well. So one of the things that we talk to our children about is ruling out options. And we often describe that as elimination. So the reason we do that is because we know then that the child has looked at every answer option, but also the process of elimination means I might just be left with the right answer. So now some people have actually put 2 letters down. I only want 1. Okay, so let's have a little look. So the first thing that we know is that all of those shapes on the top row have a circle. Now you can probably just make out that C is actually more of an oval shape rather than a circle. So we're going to rule that one out. The next thing that we can talk about is the little shape on the outside has a vertex, or a corner, if you like, touching the edge of the circle. Only one vertex. So I'm going to rule out A, because really that's got 2 on that shape. B, and it takes a little bit of a subtle eye here to see this, or a shrewd looking, astute eye to notice that that is overlapping the circle. So it can't be that one. And with D, That star has actually got 2 points touching circle. So my answer is E. So well done. I won't embarrass anyone by saying who got E in the chat, but well done if you did. Excellent stuff. So again, I was trying to make sure that I tested it out on each answer option. And that again is going to be really important when you're answering these questions. The next part of our mnemonic, so we've done shape, we've done position, is now angle. Now I found it quite hard to actually find a question that dealt with angle, because angle's a little bit of a, I suppose, a bit of an anomaly. It doesn't really come up very often, but it's still something children need to know about. So I found this question because I thought it had a bit of a subtle link with it, or certainly a bit of a tenuous link, but it's there. So this is all about finding a shape which is most alike. So what we've got is we've got 2 shapes here, and we have to work out why they're in common. Now, probably wondering why there's a big red box. I did want you to make sure that you really looked at these 2 shapes before I did anything else. And really what you're saying to yourself is, what have you got in common? Why are you the same? Why do you belong in the same group, in the same category? Now, underneath my red box, those are the answer options. So we've got to find the one, and it'll only be one, that belongs with these 2. So again, if you want to have a go in the chat, you're more than welcome to. So have a little look. So well done again, and some really speedy answers. It's interesting, isn't it, as well, when we talk about non-verbal reasoning and question types, we do expect children to do them pretty quickly. Now, Kirith will be able to give us far more information than I can on this, but for this year just gone, what we are aware of is that each of the sections was broken up into time sections, so sort of 5 minutes. And I asked Kirith earlier, how many questions did he have to do in 5 minutes? And he said about 10. Now, if you're just working that out per question, that's about 30 seconds. So 30 seconds is not very long. So you do need to bear in mind when you're doing these questions, how long are you taking? So the golden rule is about 30 seconds. As children move on, I'm sure they will get even quicker. Right, Kirith, before you hide behind your smiley face, I wonder whether you'd like to explain to the parents what the answer to this one is.
So I think that the answer is C.
C, good boy. Now, I do have to tell the parents at this point, Kirith has not seen any of these questions before. I sent him a message at 3 o'clock this afternoon and said, Kirith, would you like to come and join my workshop this afternoon? Without hesitation, his mum, and hopefully Kirith as well, said he would come and join. So I have to say, he has not seen these. So we need to bear with him. But the fact that he's told us it's C is probably a good start. Go on then, Kirith, keep going.
So I think it's C. So why? Because if you look at the small thin rectangle,
yeah,
it's going through the medium-sized one.
Yeah.
So you see like a smaller rectangle inside of that bit.
Yeah.
So then it can't be A, because then it's not going completely through the other rectangle. It could be B.
Yeah.
It can be D, can't be E. So then, why it can't be B? Because the bigger rectangle.
It's a bit fatter, that one, isn't it, Kirith? A bit wider. Yeah.
Yeah. The wider rectangle is never touching the thinner rectangle, where in B.
It is. Well done. Good boy. And then we just need to rule out D. So how are we going to rule that one out?
I'm ruling out D because it's the wider rectangles, basically the thin one, because it has to go through the whole shape, like completely through the whole shape. They can't just have one side in. It has to go completely through.
Perfect. Good boy. Well done. Lovely. So again, I think most of you in the chat gave it as C. So well done to all of you for finding that one so quickly. So the reason I linked it a little bit to angle was really the relationship between, well, two of those rectangles does need to create a 90-degree angle. I think, again, you can probably tell that when you are associating it to things like angle, the position of that shape is also going to be really, really important and relevant. So thank you, Kirith. Right, on to the next part of our mnemonic, which is number. So we've looked at shape, we've looked at position, we've looked at angle. We're now going to focus on number. So number can come up in all different types of question. The one we're going to focus on here is actually called odd one out. So I'm just going to delete that for the moment, just make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. We're going to focus on that one first of all. So again, children, you are more than welcome to have a go. Parents, of course, want you to have a go at these as well. This is about finding one that is different from the rest. So if you have a little look at that. Now, I am giving quite a lot away because I've told you to focus on number. But of course, if you weren't given that information, you would go, right, let's have a look at the shape. Right, I don't see anything. No, there's not an odd one out because of shape there. I don't think there's anything to do with position necessarily. No, nothing to do with position. Nothing to do with angle. Right, I'm now on number. So if I just go down through the chat, again, we're very, very speedy this afternoon. So lots of you have opted for D as the answer. And the reason that a lot of you are correct is because if we were to count from the top, we go consecutively 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 here, 1, 2, 3 here. But on this one, we're going 1, 2, 4. So again, when you are thinking about number, sometimes you might need to count the total of the shapes that you've got, or you might need to look at the relationship between those shapes as well. So well done if you spotted that one very, very quickly. Now, if I just move that up there, the next question, and again, you're well aware that this also involves number. Just going to delete that for the moment, just bring that in there. So can I ask you to have a look at that and see if you can work out which is the odd one out. Again, lots of you quickly answering it, getting that answer very quickly. For the ones of you that have opted for A, let's see whether you are correct. Some of you have gone for C, but let's have a little look. Now, often when you have shapes inside another shape, you're going to need to count them up. So what we're going to look at here is we've got this inner grey shape here, and we're just going to check out how many vertices it's got. So it's got 5. So we're going to write 5 down here. I've got to make sure I do this on the right side. And then how many circles inside? There are 2. So there's kind of a difference of 3 there. If we come over to this one, we're going to do the vertex first. We've got 4, and then we've got 3 circles. And then we've got here, we've got 6. And then if we count up the circles inside, we've just got to be careful that we count them correctly. We've got 5. This one, we've got 5 vertices and we've got 4 circles. So the relationship between the number of corners or vertices and the number of circles is usually it should have 1 more vertex than it does circles. But you can see on A, as lots of you obviously worked out, it has 5 and 2. So again, establishing some kind of pattern or some kind of relationship between the shapes is also really important. And I think sometimes with questions like this, it can be easy to get confused on, am I counting the circles? Am I counting the vertices? Sometimes children might do V and C. V and C, V and C. And that's fine if children do want to do that, if it helps them with their recording, but they do have to be short notations. You haven't got time to write out vertices or circles and then write the number next to it, because time is not on your side. And as I've already outlined this afternoon, you can appreciate 30 seconds to do this is quite short. Can I just put in a little request into the chat? If you do have a go, and it's lovely if you have a go, can I ask you just to write the answer once? Don't need to write it quite a few times, because all it does, it just fills up the chat. And if I miss something, I'll be kicking myself. So please do make sure if you're having a go, just write the answer once and I'll be able to see it. But well done if you went for A. Now, we're going to do a little task in a moment. So one of the very important elements of nonverbal is understanding shading and how shapes can be filled, the different types of patterns that we can have. And you'll notice at the top there, we've got lines or line type. And line type is really important because you need to be able to distinguish between different types of line. Now, I've got a little activity for you. And what I'd like you to have a go at doing, and you can do this on a bit of paper, is I'd like you to have a go at drawing as many different types of line as you possibly can. Now, if you're thinking, well, what does he mean by type? I'll give you one to get you going. I could do a dashed line. See how many you can come up with, and then in the chat, you can put how many types of line you've got, and let's see who comes up with the most. I'm delighted to say we've got 43 people in this workshop this afternoon. I do appreciate you coming along. It really makes a huge difference, and please do have a go at these questions because I think it really will help build up your understanding of nonverbal. The reason I had a little timer here is because I thought I'd time this activity. So I'm just going to grab you. Just going to do it for a minute. How many different types of line can you draw? Oh, already got someone who's got 6. Wow, fantastic. Can you add any more to it? Any other different types of line that you've thought of? I think you've all got the dash line. Oh, someone going in with 7, upping the bid. See if you can get any more than that. How many different types of line can you draw? How many of them are relevant to nonverbal reasoning? How many of them will you see in some of the questions that we look at? 14. Wow, that's amazing. 11, 7, well done. Oh, I don't think I could even think of 14 different types of line. Okay, guys, that is your minute up. So let's go through some examples and see whether you got them. If you didn't, you're more than welcome to add them onto your own list. So here we go. So we've got the solid line. I suppose it's probably the most common in nonverbal, is just to have a solid line going on the outline of a figure or shape. Dash line, which of course I mentioned, not to be confused with a dotted line. And you do need to distinguish between those. A dotted line is slightly different than a dash line. The line thickness can vary. So did you do a bold line and a fairly faint line? And again, being able to distinguish between those. The other sort of maybe slightly more obscure lines, straight, curved. Examples of other lines, perhaps with an arrow on the end, or lines going horizontally across a vertical line. We've got a sort of an S shape, an M shape, a zigzag line. So again, as you can see, there are so many different ways. I mean, even just there, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different types of line that have been created. I think someone even in the chat managed to do 14 different types. So again, when you have a look at your books, see how many different types of line you can spot. Does that help you get to the answer? Down through the rest of this slide, it does talk a little bit more about shading patterns in terms of how things are filled in. And we talk about it as solid fills, for example, when we talk about bold or grey or white. And then you can have different types of shading, lattice, or sometimes we call this cross-hatching, where it sort of goes across each other and sort of creates that nice honeycomb effect. So lots of different types of patterns. These irregular patterns are probably less common now in non-verbal. They tend to be more, I suppose, structured in a way in terms of how things are shaded in. Size is our next word, and of course size is important in terms of looking at small, medium, large shapes. This is all about overlapping as well, this one, and you can probably tell very, very quickly D is the answer because it doesn't quite go small, medium, large as the other ones do. But it was just really, this was just to illustrate how size can be incorporated into that mnemonic. Then we're on to the last three words, rotation. Funnily enough, I like this question only because I think using everyday objects can be quite nice. We do an activity with our year 4 children in this block. They're currently doing non-verbal, where we actually use a set of plastic coins and ask them to find out which is the odd one out. And it might be because of the shading. It might be because of the number on it. It might be the number of sides that coin has, whether it's a heptagon or it's a circle. And I think sometimes involving everyday objects into your practice is a great idea. And this one is obviously about a key and which one is the same when it's rotated. I've actually got a copy of it over here. And it was just to show you really, if we were to put that key back into the position that it starts in, so if we rotate it, let's go that way around, then which is the other one, of course, that we can make? And if we go around 180 degrees, we know we can make it into C. So again, don't hesitate to get everyday objects involved in your practice. One of the other things that I actually did quite a bit with my son when he was preparing for the 11 plus, he used to like doing spot the difference. And that was a lovely activity to sort of introduce things like different shapes, different shades, rotation of different shapes, and those kind of things can be good, and you can find them online quite easily. Just go into Google, do spot the difference, and actually have a go at some of the spot the difference puzzles, and it can really sharpen children's minds with looking for the right things. The next word is overlapping, and this is where shapes are on top of others or underneath others. And you can see here we've got a large shape with two smaller shapes overlapping. This is another odd one out, so it's about finding the one that is different. I'm going to just quickly give you the answer for this one. You're more than welcome to quickly have a go before me if you want to, but just because we've got quite a few questions to go through this afternoon. So we've got these two shapes. We've got black and then white inside, so you can see the bit that goes overlaps inside. It's black and white, black and white, black and white, black and white, but then this one has white and black. I'm talking obviously about, I just highlight it, that bit there and that bit there. So we come up now to our last part of our mnemonic. So I hope you've stayed with me all the way through. We've got shape, position, angle, number, size. We've got shading, rotation, overlapping, and of course symmetry. Now, symmetry is an interesting one because often when children do symmetry at school, they use a dotted line. Kirith, can I just bring you back in to this one? I wonder whether you could tell everyone what the answer is and why.
The answer is B.
Okay, good boy, well done. And why is it B, Kirith?
So first, I thought it might be A because of the dotted line.
Yep.
But when I looked at B, I thought, yeah, it probably is A. But then I looked at C, but that also wasn't like a line of symmetry.
Yep.
Then I decided to look at the bigger line.
Yep.
So A was symmetry because it can fold onto the same side.
Yeah.
B wasn't symmetry. C was symmetry, D was symmetry, and E was symmetry.
I think it's worth pointing out as well, Kirith, that we really are, I suppose, focusing quite a bit on the double line as representing the line of symmetry, aren't we? Whereas, as we can see here, this double line going across here is obviously not going to be symmetrical. Whereas the double line on all the other shapes creates that line of symmetry. So the confusing thing here, parents, is that, of course, we are very used to associating the dotted line as the line of symmetry. Whereas in this situation, it is not what we're focusing on. It is the double line. Okay, let's move on. Now, what we're going to look at now is we're actually going to delve a little bit more deeply into the actual question types. Now, this is one of the most common ones in non-verbal, and it's called Find the Shape Which is Most Alike. Now, over the years, it's evolved, as many questions evolve. We've got, usually we would only have two figures rather on the left-hand side. We now have 3. So the idea being that we're looking at what all these 3 shapes have in common. And sorry, just someone putting in the chat about folding shapes and sort of making sure that's symmetrical. So well done. I think it's a student typing that comment. And absolutely right. Yeah, when you fold something in half, it is going to make sure when the corners meet up, that makes it symmetrical. So it's an important element to know. Someone's got to leave, which is fine. Thank you very much for coming along. It will be recorded and I will be able to ping this link out to you tomorrow, so you're able to watch it back if you want to. So looking at Find the Shape Which is Most Alike, we've got to understand why these 3 shapes are linked. And quite simply, they have the same number of lines on them as they do sides. So quite simply, the first one has 3 lines, 3 sides, 4 and 4. And then we've got another quadrilateral with 4 lines on. Now, what we would want to do, first of all, I think, is just make sure that the lines are overlapping. So if they don't overlap properly, we can rule them out. So we can rule out A, we can rule out C. We're then having a look more closely now at the number of lines. So on B, you'll notice there are 5 lines, 4 sides. Definitely can't be that one. This one, we've got 2 and 4. I'm only left with E. Now, this one better be right, as I'm only left with 1, but we've got 5 lines and 5 sides, so it makes that one E. So the point I want to make on this one is that children need to make sure they find a link sometimes between shapes. So like if you're looking at the number of lines, it's like, well, I've got 5 lines. Oh, okay, I've also got 5 sides. And just establishing those links. And nonverbal is about that. It's about establishing and finding those common links. Now, I'm going to share this one with you. This one's a little bit more difficult, I think, than the previous one we've just seen. Just see whether you could work this one out. Sorry, it's numbered as number 6, but that's kind of irrelevant. So just have a little look. Can you work out the answer? So look at those 3 on the left first. What have they got in common? What makes them go together? Okay, so we've got lots of people in the chat who have put an answer down, which is great. So what we need to work out is why these 3 go together. Now, do sometimes do this, and it would be great if someone is willing to do this. Are there any parents who would like to have a go at this one and see if they could explain it to us? If you do feel brave, just unmute yourself and you can talk us through it. And please don't fret if you get anything wrong, because part of doing this is if you make mistakes, it's absolutely fine.
It's because the circles are in the corners of each shape.
Hi, good. Who's talking? Who's talking there?
Me.
Good boy. What's your name?
Harriet.
Sorry?
Harriet.
Ah, okay, good lad. Excellent. Do you want to, just go through. So you said that the ovals, or the little black ovals, are on the corners, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good boy. Which ones could I rule out then, where they're not on the corners?
You can rule out B, C,
Yep,
B and C.
yep. Brilliant, well done. And actually, that's good because you're now limiting your choices. So you've only now got 3 left. Keep going, see if you can explain the rest of it.
And the black, this bit that's shaded black has to be smaller than halfway.
Yeah, but it also forms a triangle as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Did you notice that? Yeah, well done. Good boy. Yeah, and I agree with you. It's also less than half. But I think the fact that it forms a triangle is also important. So which 2 can I rule out now because of your triangle?
D and E.
Oh, fabulous. I've only got 1 left, haven't I?
Yeah.
That's got to be the right answer. And there you can see it formulates your triangle and it's got your oval on the corner. If I was to think about my mnemonic, if I go back to my mnemonic there, then there will be 2 words that I think I need to think about. Position. And also, I need to consider shape. And again, as we look at questions like this, sometimes they are going to have more and more variables. We didn't have to count anything, but maybe that's something they could have added in, the number of ovals that were actually included. So again, you can see how they can add more variables in to make it a little bit more complicated. What I'm going to do at this junction is just share with you a typical GL assessment multiple choice sheet. And this would be what it looks and feels like. So when children do their test, they will have a separate multiple choice sheet where they will record down their answers. Now, just a couple of things about the sheet itself. Then a lot of the details will already be filled in. And I'd be right, Kirith, wouldn't I, that when you were given your sheet, a lot of the unique pupil number, school number, probably already there, was it?
The unique pupil number,
Yeah.
school number, date of test,
Yeah.
date of birth,
Yeah.
pupil's name, school name, and were all filled in for me.
That's right. Good boy. So it's already there, isn't it?
Like that.
That's right. Yeah. And again, I think just having it all there, it does give children sort of peace of mind. They always just need to double check it. It's worth just making sure that they've been given the right sheet, but I'm sure that will be the case, that they've been given the right multiple choice sheet. And then it is an audio driven exam. Now, if you're not aware of that, then it basically means that the instructions are played by an audio CD. So the children listen to someone explaining how to do the questions, and then they're set off, given told when to start and also when to finish. Now, bearing in mind that with the non-verbal reasoning, we are looking at about 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes per section, and they'd have about 9 to 10 questions to work out. Now, that is something that could change year on year. We could have more questions or the time could be shortened. But the important thing to remember in non-verbal is that once that time is up, once that time has elapsed on that topic, so let's just say that the first section was odd one out, then they can't go back to that section again. They are very much moved on to that next section. And I think the important thing to remember here as well is that when they go through the practice questions, they must record those down. So, for example, if we were going to say, well, practice 1 was A, practice 2 was D, if children don't do that, sometimes they can get very muddled with those first 2 questions. And it might be either if they don't fill out practice 1, practice 2, but they then fill it in as question 1, question 2, you can imagine, can't you, what would happen when they actually get to the end. Someone's got, Mrs. Hussain, you got your hand up.
Just a quick question. You know, when you do mock test and things, do they get tested with that style as well? So once they've done the section, that's it, then move on.
Absolutely. Yeah, so our mock exams are designed to kind of replicate what we believe that structure of the exam will be. For the first time, the summer just gone, we did also use an audio. We've never done that before. It has been an invigilator at the front of the hall giving the instructions, but we now play it through an audio. So the audio will go through the practice questions with the children, ask them to record them down, and then they're set off onto that section. We also believe, certainly with longer sections where it might be English comprehension or verbal reasoning, they're also told when they're roughly halfway through that section. When it's only 5 or 6 minutes, then they're probably not. So the expectation is they're just told to start and then stop. Kirif made a really good point earlier on to me, that he said one of the things they did at the end was they actually fold their arms and asked to put their pencils down so they can check that everyone knows that they need to stop, ready for the next section. Does that answer your question, Mum, there?
Yes, thank you.
No worries.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's very important for us, and certainly for our mock exams, that they very much replicate what the children would hopefully do in September. Okay, we move on now to have a little chat about odd ones out. We've had a look at some odd ones out already this afternoon, but just to talk to you through these questions. So the idea being that we're given 4 shapes. One of them is different from the rest. This is one of my favorites, actually. I think this is quite a clever one, this one. So the idea being that the overlapping part of it makes the shape that we have on the outside. So if we have a little shape on the outside, that should fit in to the overlap. However, if we come back to look at A, you'll notice that this parallelogram, which is the shape we have on the outside, doesn't fit into a trapezium. So, sorry, can I ask, there is someone drawing on my screen, I think it's Jatinder, if you can stop and rub it out. It's only because it becomes a little bit difficult for everyone to see exactly what's going on. So if you can rub out your jottings, that would be much appreciated. I appreciate you can write on my screen, but yeah, if I could ask you not to do that, that would be great. So again, just being able to put that shape inside that overlap is important, but of course on A, you can't do that. I had got some more odd ones out, but I think as we've seen odd one out quite a few times in some of the mnemonic, we'll actually go on to a different question type altogether, I think, and we'll have a look at some analogies.
Analogy.
So an analogy is when we have a shape on the left and it rotates or turns into the second shape, and then we need to apply the same from the third to the fourth. Now, it doesn't always have to rotate. There can be lots of different changes. This one that we've got here, again, quite a simple example, but you've got these sort of 2 basket shapes. One of the first shape rotates 180 degrees, and then, of course, it adds in an extra part to the handle, if you like. So therefore, we need to do the same with our third shape. So we describe this as our third turning into our fourth. So one of these, of course, is going to be correct. And again, that process of elimination. So for example, I'm going to rule out D and B straight away because I can see that they haven't been rotated. And then it's a case of making sure that when it is rotated, we add in that additional extra line. We're not going to have 2 extra lines in both of the shapes. We only want it in C. Children are allowed in the exam to slightly orientate their page. And I know children that have done that in the past to help them see things at a different angle, as long as they don't hold their booklet up and sort of share it with everyone else. But certainly orientation is important and can be done. Thank you again to those children and parents having a go in the chat and typing their answer. Again, it's quite good for you to give it a go and see how you get on. So as we're keen this afternoon to have a go at questions, which is lovely, can I ask you to have a go at those 2 for me, please? So these are analogies. We need to use the 2 analogies that came first as learning the rule or working out how to work out the next part of my analogy. Brilliant. Someone's even typing number 1. Number 2, just to help out in the chat, which is great. So well done. Okay, we'll quickly go through these. Well done if you've had a go. Thank you very much for putting the answers in. So that first part of the analogy, we've got a hexagon with another little hexagon inside, a black shaded hexagon. And really, I suppose this shape here actually just gets replicated at the bottom. You'll notice even here that that is exactly the same shape. So on R1, we need to make sure that that shape appears at the bottom of the two. So it will be on top, so it will overlap the other one. So I know it can't be B. And also I need to make sure that the black part appears on the left, not on the right. So I can rule that one out. Now, sometimes when I'm left with two, it's worth comparing the two. So you can see here that we've got, so the black part of the shape on the top hexagon moves across to the right. You'll notice here, it's on the left side. So that can't be right. It's got to be A. So again, quite a subtle difference. But again, once you're down to two, it's worth comparing those two. On the next analogy, and so it's a little bit difficult to see. It's a little bit fuzzy, but I hope you can make it out. We've got here times signs that become plus signs. And then we've got plus signs that become times signs. So if we've got times, we know that we're going to be needing two plus signs. So that just helps me initially because I can get rid of C and I can get rid of D. And again, it's all about trying to establish something quickly that can rule some out. Sometimes that doesn't always work. You might have to come back and consider something else. And then it's about the shapes. And what we notice is that the bottom shape, the small triangle, goes to the top, and then the big oval on the top goes to the bottom. So we know now we're going to need this sort of irregular hexagon that appears at the top to go to the bottom. And you can see it there. It's nipped in the bottom there, but it's not there. So they're the wrong way around, or the wrong shapes. So the answer is A. So again, well done. Apologies, I need to lower. Thank you for the workshop, Chris. Thank you very much. So a big thank you to you as well, Kira, for coming along this afternoon. We do appreciate it. So thank you, parents. As I say, this will be a recorded session, so we'll be able to run through these at the end. Okay, we're going to move on now to another question type. So as you can see already, we've covered find the shape which is most alike, odd one out, analogies. Now, every year, GL Assessment can pick from these banks of questions. And at Teach It Right, one of the most important things that I find is that we need to have time to get through all the different question types throughout the year, across the course. And this then gives children confidence that when they go into the exam, they recognise and they know the questions, hopefully, that will be there. I do have to point out, though, that GL Assessment have every right to put in a question type that no one has seen before. But what we tend to find with that, if that does happen, they are still testing the same types of skills, spotting differences, looking at similarities, completing grids, for example. That a grid question could be presented as a hexagonal grid, or a 3x3 or a 2x2. So there are sometimes variations that the exam board will do. But I think for me, a good person who's good at nonverbal is able to adapt and spot those relationships between the shapes, and it shouldn't really matter necessarily what format it's presented to you in. One of the question types which, again, has appeared quite regularly within the 11 Plus is something called codes. And we were talking earlier about how much questions are seen as puzzles. And I do certainly associate codes as being very puzzly. And I'm just going to walk you through this example, and then I'm going to show you some different types of codes and how they work. So let's have a little look at this one. We have to work out what the code is going to be for our test shape. And this is our test shape that I'm putting a little purple box around. And the way we're going to work out this code is we're going to work it out from the shapes and figures that were given here on the left-hand side. So the first thing to do is concentrate on the rows. So we're looking across. And what we want to do here is be able to look at the letters that are the same or that are different. So F, G, and H are all different. And I'm going to ask myself, well, why are you different? So if you have a little look, the black dot appears in the middle here. So that's probably F. G is at the top, and then the black dot goes to the bottom of the shape for H. In ours, it's in the middle. So I know that I require an F. And I often write it in the box because I think that just helps me then eliminate all the ones that are not Fs. And I'm now down to 2. Now, the bottom one represents something different. It's not going to stand for the dot again, unless the dot has a different shade. It's going to look at something different. And what we're going to focus on now is the shading of the oval. And the reason I've got 2 Ps is because they're horizontally shaded. Q is blank. There's nothing inside. It's a plain shade. What do I need? I need a plain shaded oval. Therefore, it's FQ. So my answer is B. That one would be seen as being quite simple because there isn't a huge amount to look at in the shapes. The shapes aren't hugely complicated, but it is about also making sure that you identify what those figures have in common. Now, if we go and have a look at some other questions here, I've got, I'm going to actually shift it to this one here. So I'm going to just delete that one for the moment, and I'm just going to leave 1 on the screen. Now, you'll be looking at this thinking, well, this is a big difference from what I was just looking at, because you'll notice that there are now 3 letters that stand for that figure, and they're not going horizontally, they're going vertically. So this question type would be called a vertical code. And you need to establish what the code is for this test shape again. Now, what I tend to do when I've got 3 letters is I will draw 3 lines. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the letter on the line corresponding to its position. So first, second, and third. So first column that we're going to look at these letters here. So I've got J, K, J, and L. Now the 2 J's, I need to ask myself, why 2 J's? What do those 2 figures, this one here and this one here, have in common? And you've probably noticed that they have a square as the first shape. If I go and look at mine, mine's actually got a circle. So I'm going to need a K. So I'm going to write K here. Once I've done the first letter, I'm going to rule out the ones that are not Ks. I thought I was going to be lucky there and maybe only have 1 left, but I'm not as lucky as that. Now, I could tell you that if we look at R, S, S, and T, it's all to do with the fact that the S and the S is the triangle. But I don't need to work too hard for the second letter. And the reason I don't is because I've got a T here and I've got a T here. So I know, as long as my first letter is right, that it has to be a T. Now I'm going to concentrate on the last letter. Is it an X? Is it a Z? The 2 X's is because the dot appears on the far left. The Z is because it appears on the first shape there on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is Y. What do I need? I need a Z because it appears on the left. So my answer, well done if you got this right, is going to be E. Well done if you managed to get that right. I appreciate that one is a little bit more difficult because there's a lot more to look for. But you imagine having 12 of those with 3 letters. So what GL Assessment did is they changed it from being 2-letter codes most of the time to introducing 3-letter codes. And that tends to be the ones that we also introduce to the children as well, certainly when we start doing more test practice. And for the ones of you that are interested to know, we do use a lot of these packs. These are the GL Assessment familiarization booklets. They are brilliant. There are 3 packs of these. And throughout the year, certainly also in our revision camps, we will buy these in for the children. So please don't go to any expense in buying these. We will supply these within our course. And we do find they are absolutely fantastic at covering these question types and making sure that children know how to approach them. Please do feel free, if I've gone through something too quickly or you're not quite sure, please do ask. Kirith, is there anything you want to say about these code questions at all?
I mean, there was one thing.
Yeah.
So after you figured out K,
Yeah.
you eliminated B, C, and D.
Yeah.
And then you didn't actually have to figure out the second letter because they were both T.
That's right. Good boy. Yeah,
Better.
I did mention that briefly, that I think you're right. There's no point, is there, spending time working out when you know you're down to two options, if that middle letter is the same. It would also apply, wouldn't it, Kirith, if the last letters were the same?
Yeah.
There would be no point working that out. It might just be the middle letter we've got to do. And actually, you're right, Kirith, because it is about finding a shortcut, isn't it, sometimes, and making sure that you do it as, you know, as quickly as you can in that respect. Very good. Shall we move on to another question type now?
There is another thing.
Yep.
But if you had the first and one letter the same, then you could just figure out the second or last letter.
Yep.
Or you had it like the first two letters the same, figure out the last letter.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I think you do want to be able to find those shortcuts, whether it be the first, second, or third that are the same. Then you don't want to waste time working out a letter that you already can establish or work out. I would agree with you on that one. Can I just ask you, did they come up in the exam, the code ones?
I think they did.
You think they did? Okay. It's interesting to know, isn't it? They may not come up every year, but they certainly are a very common question type. Maybe, though, not quite as common as these, Kirith, which are matrices or grid questions. And I was saying earlier that with a grid question, you can have so many different types of grid. You can have a 2x2, 3x3. Hexagonal grids were the ones that GL started writing a few years ago, which are slightly different. And the idea being that we're trying to find a shape that goes into a space or a gap. And the way we work it out is we work out the rule for the other rows or columns to give us a clue on what goes in the middle. This, again, would be seen as a very easy example. And some of you have already very quickly worked out that, of course, we need E in there. We need a triangle at the bottom. Sometimes children might like drawing it in. And then we need the two circles either side. And again, just sketching it in there, and you're allowed to do that, just means that you know exactly what you're looking for. So I've got 3 more for you to have a go at here. Now, these are all matrices. They are all 3x3 grids. So please do have a go at these. If we number the questions 2, 3, and 4, I can see in the chat what your answers are, and then I'll go through them with you and just explain how to achieve the answers. So do give these a go. So the main part of this is looking at 2D. We will be looking at spatial reasoning today as well. So please do stay on board. Appreciate this will be a recorded session, but it'd be good to show you some cubes and nets. I know Kirith is a cubes and nets expert, so we'll be having a look at some of those later as well. Thank you very much for putting lots of answers in the chat and giving these ones a go. We'll go down through these now just to share with you what the answers are. So let's have a look at number 2. I think, again, when we look at level of difficulty, it's probably the easiest one, just because it's what we would describe as a sort of a repeating pattern, if you like. So each row needs to have a white circular one, 2 dots, and then a hatch shading. We are missing, of course, the 2 black circles that go together. Sorry, I'm trying to draw those circles with my mouse, but it's not come out very clearly. But you can see it's not going to be 1. It's not going to be the plain circle or the 1 black. It's got to be 2, and then it's not the 2 there. I think, again, sometimes they do start a little bit easier. So what we tend to find with the way that GL structure their sections is the first question tends to be the easiest one. And as they move on, they tend to get a little bit more tricky as they are completing them. It's a bit like when children do online adaptive tests. Tends to be they start with easy questions, and gradually, certainly when they get a question right, the next question is a little bit harder. So I think that's certainly sort of part of GL's thinking with the non-verbal as well. So let's have a look at number 3. What we've got here is we've got, we know that we've got the 2 circles, the 2 triangles. I do know that this has to be a square in here now, or I don't know, you may argue with me that that might be more like a rectangular shape there. I think it's been stretched a little bit, but so I can rule out the circles very quickly. Now, the shading is actually demarcated because of what's happening on this column here on the left. So the hatch shading that you've got going this way is the same hatch shading that we've got over on this bow tie shape here. Therefore, we've got the plain shading on the outside here, plain in the middle. This, therefore, needs to be hatched going down vertically like that. So if we were to have a little look, we can see that it's not E, it's not B. It's got to be D. So I'm just intrigued. Just have a look back through the chat a little bit and see how we got on with that one. Yeah, we did very well. Well done. Excellent stuff. Brilliant. So just a case of making sure you understood how that shading had arrived, certainly in that column there. And that's hopefully fairly clear. This next one is a sort of a role reversal, if you like, that what we would say is this is column 1, this is column 2, this is column 3. Column 1 has been added to column 2 to make column 3. However, the shading or the dotted line, excuse me, has been reversed. So we need to think about how this would work out logically, that because this is dotted over here, then therefore I need it to be bold on the bottom. And then we've got these. So if we were to have a look at what would slot in there, it would have to be B, because it's not dotted. It's not the bit at the top. This is the wrong shape, and it's not dotted and bold. So 4B would be the answer there. So again, if you were to put that shape into that gap in there, it would complete your puzzle and hopefully make sense. But sometimes they do that where they switch it over. Again, I suppose it's to just try and complicate it a little bit more. Okay, so matrices, again, a very popular question type, something we do a lot at Teach It Right. We practice matrices a huge amount, so children are familiar with it, and hopefully it's a question type that will come up, because I think generally children tend to perform well on these, certainly when they know all the variations and the different ways of presenting these questions. I think also bearing in mind that hexagonal grids is one that GL have been writing, which I think I'd mentioned briefly earlier. So again, do look out for those in the packs as well. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about sequences, because I think it's one of those ones where I think it's very clear to understand what you need to do. I think maybe it's more about explaining some of the differences that they could sort of add in. So one thing that we do notice with sequences is that the square, or the empty square, can vary in its position. So sometimes the empty square might be at the beginning of the sequence, therefore you sort of have to work backwards, if you like. Sometimes it's a case of being at the end or in the middle. And really, I think with a sequence, you need to be very aware of how the shapes change from one to another. How much have they rotated, for example? Have they changed the shading? And sort of break it down into what I would describe as little manageable pieces. So the first thing, for example, in this very simple sequence here is that I would go, well, black, white, black, and I definitely know I need a white semicircle on this one here. So again, if we were to have a little look at our answer options, E goes straight away. And you might say to me, well, that's only removing one. But one sometimes can be better. If you're down to 25% rather than 20%, if it becomes a guess, you would much rather a child did that. So again, ruling out your options, it's a good idea. Notice I'm not scribbling through the whole shape. I'm just doing it on the letter. And there's a reason for that. I want to be able to look at the figure. I want to be able to read what I've got. Now, the next thing that we're going to look at is how that semicircle is moving around the circle. Sometimes it's worth children knowing a little bit more about things like clock faces and how many degrees between the numbers. So I'm sure we all know 30 degrees between each number on a clock face. So, for example, if we were saying, well, that's 11 o'clock, that's 12 o'clock, that's 1 o'clock, I need it in 2 o'clock's position. Okay, so again, it's worth, or sorry, in this situation, actually, it might come across to 3 o'clock, mightn't it? Because it's gone 45 degrees around. So again, just knowing where it's going to end up. So I could rule out the ones which are not at 3 o'clock. The next thing to look at, because A and B, as you can see, the semicircles in the same position, I'm then going to look at the line. So we're going to go around 45 degrees. It's going to be vertically straight down like that. Therefore, it's B. Sometimes when children do work these questions out, they see it immediately, pretty much straight away. The only danger with that can be that there might be another option that is very, very similar or nearly identical, and there's just a subtle difference. And we do see that a lot in nonverbal, where I would describe children as being slightly impulsive, and they go, oh, it's that one. And then you say, but have you looked at that? So when you're working with your child at home, just talk through, for example, when they do get an answer, and we did mention this briefly at the beginning of the workshop, get them to articulate why an answer is an answer. And that's so important, because the more they can explain their nonverbal reasoning, actually the better they will get. And I certainly know this for children who are very good. Someone like Kirith, for example, who I know is very good at NVR, but I also know he's able to explain it. He can say, well, this is how I did it. This is how I arrived at that answer. And I think that certainly is a correlation that you need to make with your own child, is that their nonverbal is going to get better if they can explain how they've done it. So I've got more sequences and things here for you to do, and they will be in your booklet. Sorry, just going back to that one. So please feel free to have a go. Sometimes they involve rotation. This is a rotating one, but then adding an extra black rectangle, plus it goes black, white, black, white. But again, your child will have practiced a lot of sequences with us. So I am going to move on and going to go and have a look at some spatial reasoning. Okay, don't know. Oh, Kirith, you're back with us. That's good. I know you had a few problems with your computer, I could tell, but you're back, which is great. Do you want to just explain to our parents a bit more about hidden shapes and what you know about these?
So hidden shapes is my second favourite.
Oh, good. Pleased we found another favourite.
So hidden shapes is when there's this shape which gets put into a larger shape, which is then cut up. So when you try, then they will show you a picture of the shape, and you'll try to find which one it's in. And normally it can't really change size, so like the shape would be the same size, and it wouldn't rotate. So it's a bit easy.
Thanks, Kirith. Can I just jump in just quickly? So one of the things I think our parents will need to know is just some of the terminology that we use when we're teaching it. So these 5 figures here, the ones that I'm just putting a blue outline around, are what we call our designs. Okay, and this is what we call our target shape. And our target shape, just as you said, belongs in only one of those designs. It will only be able to be found once. And what Kirith mentioned there was that the shape that we're trying to find, the size will stay the same. And he's absolutely right. The size is not going to change. What we know, though, that GL can do is they can change the orientation. And by orientation, of course, we mean the rotation of that shape. They could say that you have to find it and it could be rotated. Some of the examples we're going to share with you in a moment are not rotated. They have remained exactly the same. Now, children will need to be very aware that when they're listening to the instructions for this question type, so hidden shapes, they need to listen out for if that shape could be rotated, because if it could be, it changes the question type completely. One of the things that we often talk to children about as well is identifying specific elements or properties, if you like, of the hidden shape. So in this one here, I'm quite aware, and if I just get a line here, a nice straight line for us, is that this here is a very long line. Somewhere that line is hidden. Now, you can sometimes rule out shapes that don't have that specific feature. So, for example, I know it's nowhere in E. I can't see it's slightly diagonally drawn, isn't it, that line? So, again, it's worth, and actually C is another example where it's there, but it's too short. So, again, it's all about trying to find that hidden shape. So, I'm going to show you some designs now, and we'd like you in the chat just to put down the letter where you think that shape is hidden. Sometimes children as well, they will actually fill in the shape. They'll shade it in because it means it's sort of blocked out. But have a look at the properties. So, for example, look at this right angle here. Look at this sort of point there that's created. And again, those features will be really important. See if you can find it. Oh, we're on fire this afternoon. Thanks, guys. Well done. Amazing. So, I can't see. Oh, someone's put a different letter. It is the outline. So just be clear that it's the outline we're focusing on. There might be something happening in the middle of it on these shapes, on these designs. You have to ignore that. We're only considering the outline. That's what we need to find. So there might be lines going on inside. You need to ignore those. Okay. So well done if you've spotted that it's here. And I'm going to draw it for you just so you can see. So it goes down that way. And it goes down to the bottom. So to create this triangle at the bottom, then it goes straight the way along and then straight up. So again, you can imagine picking that up. It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, and it would slot nicely in there. So well done if you spotted that one. Here's another one for you to try and find. Oh no, sorry, it's the same one. Try and find that one. I'll just make it a bit bigger. This one's quite an easy one, actually. I think it's the last one that's more tricky. See if you can find that one. If you can spot it. Well done if you've written the right answer in the chat. This one's quite interesting because it can actually go into two positions, but in the same design. So I don't quite know why it's done like that, but I think they're exactly the same size. So key elements, same size, same orientation in these. And also it is the outline that we're looking at. Brilliant. Well done, everyone. You've spotted it's in you. And it can go there, 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 or it could be there as well. So it's kind of could be in both. That doesn't usually happen. They usually do it only where it can come into one. Just to mention as well, for the ones of you that have or your schools do CATS tests, this is also a question type that often appears within CATS tests. Interestingly, here they've gone RSTUV. In the 11 plus, they tend not to do that. It tends to go A, B, C, D, E. Does the orientation have to stay the same? In these questions, yes, but it doesn't have to be. So it could be they are rotated. Like just to emphasize that point again, that children need to listen to those instructions, that they could possibly rotate these shapes. Absolutely. Right, one more for you to find. It's a bit like my duck. Try and find my duck. See if you can find it in there. Certainly a slightly more challenging question, because there's a lot of lines, but also I think the designs are quite similar. And that, of course, is where the examiners make these questions harder, is the designs don't vary massively. So I can see some answers coming through in the chat. So thanks again for giving these a go. And I hope you've enjoyed it this afternoon, just having a go at some questions, getting a feel for sort of the level of difficulty, I suppose, that some of the children have to sort of go through with non-verbal and spatial reasoning. So well done. Loads of you going for L. And let's see if I can draw it for you and see if I can prove that this is right. So we'll take it in little parts. So where's this line here? That line is there. Then it goes diagonally up towards the left corner. So it goes up there. Then it goes across a little way, which is this line here. Then it goes up there. Now this is a bit more, it doesn't come down the first line, it actually goes down the second line, then across a little bit, and then down. So it does very much look like a duck, doesn't it? There we go. There's our duck. We should colour it in yellow. Okay, well done if you spotted that one. Again, not an easy one, that one, but you can see how the level of difficulty, of course, can change. The hidden shape that you're actually trying to find, they can vary that. They could put in curved lines as well, and they do get a little bit more difficult. Now, one of the question types that you may remember I asked Kirith at the beginning about was, which ones do you like the most? And he mentioned something called fold and punch. This is also referred to as figure analysis, and it does appear within CATS tests as well. Now, I'm actually going to rub that out for the moment, just so you don't see all the jottings over it, and just explain what this is all about. So these questions are about folding paper and punching holes in it. And we often do it, certainly in our lessons, where children are given squared paper. You can often use Post-it notes for this, and given a hole punch, and they create the holes and they open it up and see what it looks like. And you can do that at home. The more tricky thing is when the holes differ. So the holes aren't circles, they're hearts, they're triangles, they're squares. And I must admit, I had to go into sort of craft shops and try and find hole punches with certain shapes. Even hearts is one that they often do. So this one is a very simple example and only has one fold. The more complicated ones have multiple folds. So the arrow that we have here points towards where the fold will take place, and then the dotted line that we're left with was where the square previously was, or the outline of the first square. Now we are allowed to draw, of course, on here to show us where things will end up. This one's a very simple fold down, open it back out, and of course we'd have a very much a mirror image of the circle on the bottom appearing in the top. So when it's got one circle, so that's one way of doing it, is to count the number of circles that we've got. But they need to be, obviously, in the correct position. Now, I'm going to show you... should we start with this one, Kirith? Oh,
wait, I did it by accident.
That's okay, don't worry. Would you like to just talk the parents through this one very quickly?
Okay, so what I would do was I would work backwards. So I would start off by undoing this fold here. So then if I did that, there would be another triangle over here. And then after it was flipped horizontally, so down. So then after we have this triangle, it would be mirrored. So the base would be facing the other triangle. So then you would have 4 triangles, each one in a different corner. And then that leaves us with the answer B, because C, they're all pointing up, while they would have to point different ways. So B.
Here, brilliant. Well done. Good boy. And obviously just sketching it in there. Now, again, I think if we were to rank questions according to difficulty, you would probably say this one is one of the easier ones. Let's have a look at one that's maybe slightly more complicated. If you want to just rub out your jottings, and then I'll make this question slightly bigger. And then I wonder whether you'd like to talk the families through this one instead.
Okay, so I would work backwards. So then I would get so I would do this fold first.
Yep.
So then because it was folded like this, if I were to rotate my page or something, then I could just imagine that was a line of symmetry, and then just draw the other 2 circles like that.
Gareth, can I just make a little point here, which I think is quite important for the parents to see and the children to see that are in the call? There are these tiny little lines, aren't they? And these tiny little lines are what we would describe as the midpoint. They're the middle of that line. And it actually guides us, because if we were to focus on these 2 circles here, you notice that there is one either side of those lines. On the answers, you can also see you've got these little lines everywhere, and they are really significant, because sometimes if you don't adhere to those lines and you don't think about where the circles or the triangles or the hearts would be in relationship to that, you can make a mistake. So Kira, it's not easy for Kira to draw on the screen, but you'll notice that he's got one circle here below that line and then one circle there above that line. So again, if we were to look along all the answer options, apart from A, they've all got those 2 circles that we require there. This is another question type where the answer options are just invaluable, because once we can establish what the pattern is, we can rule out ones where those circles haven't appeared or they're not punched. So thanks, Chris. Sorry, I interrupted your explanation a little bit, but do you want to just finish it off quickly?
So after I've done that halfway thing, I would then rotate my page again so that the line is halfway, and then just repeat what I did. So we're going to have one above the line and then one below the line, and then we're going to do the same thing on the bottom, because it's done 4 times, because if you split it up into 4 triangles.
Good boy, well done. Yeah.
And then after that, you would have one on the left side and one on the right side. So then it can't be B, because it's got 4 circles in the middle. It can't be C, because the bottom line, circles are on top of each other, not next to each other. It can't be D, because it's got a circle in every corner where it's not supposed to. So it can't be D. That leaves us with E, which is correct.
Brilliant. Well done, Kira. Good boy. Excellent. Well done. Yes. Ticking your own work there. Well done. Good boy. So again, it's very clear to see, isn't it, that drawing it in is going to help you. Working backwards was interesting. You saying that, Kirith, you want to work backwards from each of those folds, but also drawing in potentially where those circles should be once it's opened out. So well done. They do, and we would say this, Kirith, wouldn't we, that they do get a bit harder, don't they, as we know, but certainly children do get very familiar with those. Kirith, can I just ask you to remove your workings just for the moment? Thank you so much for doing that, and I will draw on you in a minute to help me out with these cubes and nets as well. So we're going to have a look at another spatial reasoning question type now. We've got 2 more question types to cover off in this workshop. So thank you very much for attending, and I hope you're finding it useful. I sometimes feel I could probably do a whole workshop on one question type, but that would certainly not do. And it is a case of trying to cover as many as we can. So I hope you feel we've done them justice. Someone did say on the fold and punch, they didn't quite understand it, or they mentioned in the chat, I don't understand. Don't worry. These sometimes the question types we haven't covered, certainly spatial reasoning, we haven't done a lot of yet this year. We are very soon after our maths and English block with year 5 children going back to do non-verbal and verbal reasoning, and we will be doing spatial reasoning with the children. So don't worry, if you haven't covered it, you're not quite sure, don't worry, it will come. Now, I thought I would just go through some cubes and nets questions. This is one of the question types that I know for a lot of families is often the one that children do find very, very difficult. We have found various resources over the years, one of which is a magnetic cube. Now, these can be found on Amazon. They're quite expensive. They're about £13, but they are incredibly useful, particularly for cubes and nets, and maybe worth the investment because this is an opportunity for children to draw the shapes on the different faces. The reason that we have the 3 different colours is because those colours are the faces that when the cube is folded up don't touch each other. And you'll see that someone's saying they've already got one, which is lovely in the chat. You can that can really help you with actually visualizing what happens when a net is folded up. And I think this was a long time in coming. I remember when we first started doing cubes and nets at Teach It Right, it was a case of drawing out the net, cutting it out, sticking it together, and it was quite laborious, to be honest. Whereas with this magnetic cube, you can wipe off the figures and you can start again, and it's really, really useful. It's just called Magnetic Cube. And if you type Magnetic Cube into into Amazon, you will find it. I will just put that into, so we've got a meeting group chat, and I'm just going to
but I can't
see if I can put that in there.
Is it off or not? I can't see why.
Hi, sorry. If we can just mute ourselves, it's that background noise we want to avoid if we can. So I have put that link into the chat. So hopefully you'll be able to click on that and you'll be able to get to it if you are interested in purchasing it. But it certainly can really, really help with this question type. So let me just walk you through an example, just so we can understand what we need to do. So the idea with cubes and nets is we fold up the net and it will create one of these cubes, and it will only be able to create one. The first thing that we teach the children to do is look for shapes that don't even exist on our net. We describe those as aliens because aliens, of course, don't exist. So you can see on B, we've got 2 squiggles here. Well, there's only one squiggly Z shape there. So again, we have a look across. Are there any other aliens, anything else that appears which is not on our net? No. Now, the next thing I'm going to think about are the opposite faces. So my red faces here can't touch each other. You can see here on A, they are touching each other, the 5 dots and the grey. So we rule that one out. The next thing that I'm going to do is get the Z, and then we've got this sort of flag shape here with the 2 black and white bold lines. They can't touch each other. So if I have a little look on D, look, you can see there they are, they're touching each other, not allowed to do that. The next one we actually know the answer. We know it's C, but just to finish it off, I know that the triangle can't touch the square. So again, if that was happening, we would rule that out. Now, the opposite faces, there are 11 different ways of creating a net. This is what we call a T-net. So it's probably the most basic of nets that we can have. So I think children it's worth learning different ways that the nets can be constructed. And I'll show you some different ones in a moment. But I think also learning those opposite faces is a really good starting point. So which ones can't touch? That sometimes, though, is only going to get you so far. And what you need to start considering is where shapes are pointing, what they're looking at, the orientation of those shapes, whether a shape appears on the left of the cube or the right of the cube. So we know that the answer on this particular one is C. But let's go and have a look at some other ones and see whether we can identify what the answers are. So let's start with this one first of all. So let's go through our basic rules. So some of you might like to have a go at it in the chat, but I'll go through it nice and slowly so we can see how we would expect a child to do it. So first of all, are there any aliens? Are there any shapes that don't appear on the net? Well, you might have seen in B, there's 2 shapes with 2 dots. We've only got 1. The next thing I need to think about is the fact that the grey shape, stripy, cannot touch the wavy shape. But in C, they are touching each other. The other thing that we need to think about is when these shapes are together, they should create an L shape. And that, again, is really going to help us because if we look at D, you can see, look, we've got the L shape there that we require. It can't be A because the blank face, which is over here on the left, can't touch the arrow. Well, they are touching each other there. So we'd rule out that one. We were mentioning earlier about how nets can change. So if you have a look at this one, I'll just delete that one for the moment. This is a completely different type of net. But we still can establish which ones can't touch. So this blank face here, when it's folded up, will not touch this one. This one here will not touch this one. And then the circular shape with the dots inside, the 4 dots, can't touch the cross at the bottom. And that's really, really going to help me. But as I say, sometimes you do need to think about other things and you need to be able to consider, well, what happens, for example, this black arc shape here is going to touch this cross. Imagine that's going to go all the way around and end up being up here somewhere. So what is it going to be like when they're touching each other? And I think sometimes using that magnetic cube that I shared with you earlier, this one here, that can really help you not only create your different types of net, but show you what happens when it actually folds up, what's pointing at what. And arrows are a good example of that. If you look at this arrow here, what's that arrow pointing at? What shape is that pointing at? So again, I would really suggest you get these. We do have them at Teach It Right. We do use them in our lessons. We've brought a lot in over the years just to make sure that children, particularly who's really struggle with cubes and nets, can use it. So yeah, something that I would certainly recommend. The other thing to mention about cubes and nets is that we haven't seen it appear within the 11 plus for a very, very long time. That's not to say that it couldn't be put into an 11 plus exam. So first of all, I don't want parents or children to get worried and stressed about it. Certainly do your best and have a go, and we'll certainly give you all the right strategies and techniques to work these out. But certainly don't want people to feel that this has to be something that is practice over and over again, particularly if you are finding it difficult. They haven't appeared within the 11 plus for a little while, and if they do come up, I'm sure all the things that we have taught you in terms of how to do these will stand you in good stead. There isn't a lot out there in terms of practice for this. We do have lots of cubes and nets questions that we've written over the years that we use with our students. Certainly Peter Francis, who is the guru of non-verbal, he's the person who writes the 11 plus exam, is certainly somebody who you would go to. Miss Hussein again.
Hi, sorry,
That's
just a
all
quick
right.
question. You talked about all the different types. In the assessment, will there be one type of each question, or will there be a weighting more heavier on one type
Yeah,
and lenient on the other?
yeah, really, again, a good question. Not something that I can necessarily give you an affirmative answer for. All I can say is what tends to happen, certainly the way that GL have done it in the past, is they would stick to the same net. So they would give them all as T nets. And tend not to vary them a huge amount. I know when CM were writing these, they would actually have a mixture of different types of net within that question type. It is something which is a little bit hard to predict, just because they haven't come up for so long, and when they did come up, they were using sort of T nets, these sort of standard ones that we were looking at earlier. But who knows really, in terms of what they could do going forward. And I think we have to be really careful that we don't start saying, oh, well, they didn't do this or they didn't do that. They've never done that, because things can change. And I think certainly for children practicing these, and the bond books are very good for this, you can practice ones where you do see different types of net. Okay, everyone, we're going to move on to our last question type. I don't know if you're pleased that that's the case or not, but thank you very much for staying with me this afternoon and going through non-verbal reasoning. We're going to have a look at a question type which is relatively new in spatial reasoning, and that is called block counting. Now, I'll just explain a little bit about these, and then we'll have a look at some and maybe have a go at some as well. So, block counting is where children are given a pile of blocks. The blocks are all the same size, which is worth noting, and you have to work out how many blocks are there. Now, of course, you can't always see every single block, but blocks are not allowed to float in the air. They are have to have the same size block underneath supporting it. Otherwise, it would just topple over, I suppose. Now, what we would certainly suggest is children look at these in kind of stacks, or how many in each stack to help them. There is certainly an element here where children can easily miscount. They can miss blocks out. So I'm going to share with you a very simple format that I think probably works quite well, and that would be to number how many in each stack. So in this one here, we've got 2, 2. This one goes a bit higher. Got 3, 2 again, 2, 1, and 1. Now, if we add all those numbers up, we will arrive at the total. Now, it is worth noting as well that when you add them up, it can be worth striking them out so you know that you've counted them. So I'm going to do my 2s. I've got 4 2s, which I know, of course, gives me 8. And I've got the 3 1s down here. That gives me a running total of 11. And then I've got my 3 over there. So it's 14. So E is the answer to that one. And again, some of you typing the answer before I can work it out, which is great. So these, again, can be quite tricky, particularly when you can't see all of the blocks. Now, these ones that we're looking at on the screen, of course, are all just normal cubes, but they have varied the type of block. And if we have a look at this question here, I go down a little bit. Here we are. Oh, reveal the answer too quickly. You'll notice here we've got a cuboid. And this, again, needs us to work out how many blocks we have. Kirif, you've mentioned in the chat this is one of your favourites again. Would you like to have a go at this one with our parents?
Okay. So normally when it's the small cubes, those are my favorite. When it gets into cuboids,
Yeah.
They get a tiny bit more annoying, because then when it's cubes, it's easier to just figure out where they go. But when they're cuboids, if there was like something like one here, and then there was one behind it, and then one on top that goes higher, it gets a bit confusing.
It's interesting, actually, Kira, with this particular question. If we look at these two blocks, so I just put a little line on there, there has to be a block underneath there, doesn't there? Because it's already two cubes high, if
This
you
one
like.
gets me out because there's going to have to be another 2 wide block. But the next one, that one's going to go this way because it can't go that way. But it can go, but not that way. So it gets confusing.
You want to see then how many you think you've got there?
Okay. I think. Wait, let me get it on my drawings. 1. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I count that one? Wait, I don't know. Wait, no. 1.
What
Two.
could you do that would stop you repeating the same one again?
1, 2,
That's it.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, yeah, 8, 9, 10. I think.
Okay, good boy. And I know it's difficult, isn't it? Particularly when you can't see them all. In actual fact, there are 12 there altogether. So it's worth noting, of course, you've got this one here, which we know is touching the ground. Do you remember we talked about that one going underneath these two? So that would make 4. Then you've got 5, 6, 7. There must be one underneath there. So that will give us 8. Then we've got this one here, which is 9, 10, 11, 12.
Oh.
Now, I think, again, a question like that is difficult, isn't it? Because you can't necessarily see all the blocks, but you have to remember there has to be the same size block directly underneath to support it. And as you mentioned earlier, probably when they're cubes, they're probably slightly easier, aren't they, than when they're cuboids?
I know what I did wrong.
Yeah.
So this cube right here,
Yeah.
I somehow made it 3 long. I made it do
see.
all of those.
Ah, right. Okay.
One of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
My second one was I think I forgot to do this one and got confused that it goes underneath and then like this on it.
Well, I know also it probably is a lot easier, isn't it, when it's sort of on paper in front of you and you can draw on it and write on it easier. So don't worry. I know generally with these ones you're very good, but we've talked, haven't we, about not recounting the same block again. So if we demarcate it with a little cross or a little line, that should hopefully help us work it out. But well done. Now, just to finish off with, just wanted to just share with you just a couple of different games that are on the market for the 11 plus non-verbal reasoning section, and some of which we use again within our lessons, within revision camps. One of the most popular ones is a game called Cubics. And it's really good fun. We use it really because it's great not only for sort of dexterity, but actually for repeating a pattern. It's very good with matrices. Some people saying they love Cubics. It's Cubics Extreme version. Yes, thank you very much. There is an extreme version. So a really good fun game. I always think with Christmas around the corner, try and get in an educational game into your stockings is a good idea. But certainly Cubics is a very popular game, a game we use a lot within our lessons. This one here is Cognosis. And just before we came on to the chat, I just sent an email to the lady it's a husband and wife combo who have actually put this game together just to see whether it is still there and still available. So I'm waiting for a reply. But Cognosis is a card game which, a bit like Snakes and Ladders, without the snakes and ladders, but the idea is to sort of move up through the numbers and then you get a series of cards and questions. And it's just a fun board game, I think, to play as a family. And it has lots of non-verbal in it. So I'll fill you in with more details on that. Certainly, if it is still available, we'll send a link out via email. Play to Pass is a game that is no longer in circulation. We still have copies of those. That was a game actually designed by a lady called Alison Primrose. And Alison Primrose, it just might not mean a lot to you, that name. But when I say that she has written over, I think it's over 2 million books, they are Bond books. And Alison Primrose wrote most of the non-verbal reasoning items for Bond. And she hand drew a lot of the questions, which I think is always a fascinating thing, before they actually got put into the format in the book. But I have had the privilege of meeting Alison before, and she did create a game called Play to Pass, which again is a card game, which I think is great for non-verbal. So if you're interested in that, or you want to purchase it, we do have some copies of that. Just let the office know, and we can always get them to the centre. So Play to Pass, and it's a card game for non-verbal reasoning, which is good fun. Set is another game. It has a few limitations, I think, Set, but a nice game to maybe use. And then we've got, I put in a jigsaw puzzle, because I think jigsaws have actually got, again, a big correlation with non-verbal. So again, maybe something that you may wish to use. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I hope you have found it useful. I certainly have really valued having Kirith with us as well. I know, as I say, Kirith really enjoys non-verbal. So Kirith, thank you very much for coming along and helping out this afternoon. I really appreciate it. Your Sunday afternoon and you're joining me on a workshop. Nothing more enjoyable, hey? So thank you very much. Parents, thank you very much for participating. Have a go at the questions. Hope you've enjoyed it. I will stop the share now, and then I'm actually going to also stop the recording, and then we will also be sending out this link to you. So just bear with me